So are we good to go? Yeah, we're good to go.
Yes, for now.
Yeah, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the first episode of Convergence of Blockchain and Fintech. So, my name is Lee Uchama. I'm the CEO of Coin News Extra. So, I'll be anchoring this panel. So, with me to co-anchor this panel, I have with me Ayanda. Ayanda, you are also welcome.
Thank you, Lee, for that introduction. Hello, and a warm welcome to all of you. My name is Ayanda Morofani, and I'm so pleased to be sharing this platform with my wonderful co-host, Lee. I'm coming to you all the way from the warm city of Dubai, and I'm really excited to be part of this session today. And I hope and I believe that all of us are going to gain a lot of new insights and information from the topic today. Lee, back to you.
Yeah, interesting. On behalf of AFRICUNIA TV and Coin News Extra, I'm equally excited to welcome you to this conversation. And we are pleased you could join us in this conversation today.
Lee, I think this is such a timely conversation, a timely session between AFRICUNIA TV and Coin News Extra, because the subject is one that is so, how can I say it? One that is so mystical. People want to know more about it. And, you know, it has some trending buzzwords. You have to be on planet Mars or the moon not to have heard about blockchain and crypto. And no, I'm not talking about the latest hip hop stars. These are not names of some rap stars. These are the future of financial transactions. And our subject today is going to help us to understand these concepts a lot more. A subject today is understanding the fintech sector.
So to help us talk about this wonderful, like Ayanda rightly said, we have a good experts in this niche who are going to be helping us to understand this very important sector. So we'll be talking about, we have experts in this area. They are here to help us understand more and hopefully realize the opportunities in the blockchain and fintech sector. So we'll be introducing our esteemed panelists shortly.
Yes, over the next 1 hour, we're going to have a 45-minute discussion by our esteemed panel. And thereafter, we will have a 10 to 15-minute question and answer section where you, the audience, will have an opportunity to pose your questions to our panel. So make those 10 to 15 minutes count. This session is being recorded. So after the session, you should be able to catch us again on repeat and repeat and repeat again on all our social media platforms. If you're not following us yet or connected to us, I encourage you to do so you can watch this session and keep up to date with future sessions. And now I'm going to hand over back to Lee to introduce our esteemed panel to us.
Thank you, Ayanda. I introduce to you our esteemed panel. I'm beginning with Babatunde, Dr. Babatunde Obrema, who is the COO of Fintech Association of Nigeria. Doctor, you are welcome to this amazing program.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure being here.
It's a pleasure to have you also. Joining Babatunde, I also have with me Rob McNee. He is the co-founder TUSC. Rob, you are welcome to.
Well, thank you for having me, guys. I really do appreciate the opportunity to speak to your community, and I really like hearing about what's going on in blockchain outside the West, and I think this is a great opportunity. So thank you.
Yes, Ayanda, you will be introducing your countryman.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity to introduce my kabayan. If you're Filipino, you know what that means. Kabayan means my fellow countryman. So I'm really pleased to introduce my kabayan, Shadrach Kubiani. Look, my time in the UAE I've lost how to pronounce the names. Shadrach Kubiani, welcome Shadrach. Shadrach is the co-founder of Coronet Blockchain, a supply chain, digital infrastructure, leveraging blockchain technology capabilities. And he also has, experience in the Big Four. He was previously the National Business Development Manager for Deloitte. When we talk about the Big Four, we're talking about the Big Four accounting firms in the world. And I remember Deloitte last year was #1. So we truly have great pedigree with us today. Welcome, Shadrach. I'm happy to have you with us.
Thank you kindly. I'm very delighted, and thanks for your hospitality. I see that my fellow country decision makers dispatched the best of the best to represent Africa in the UAE. I hope Dubai is treating you well. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. It is. Come and visit.
Yeah, it's our pleasure to have our panelists for this wonderful program. Also, for our audience who took our time to join in us for this interesting, the first edition of Convergence of Blockchain and Fintech. So I'll go straight to the questions of the day because we don't have much time. Let me start with Rob. Rob, let me throw these questions to you. When we talk about fintech space, what areas does fintech cover and include? And is there a specific segment of the economy that is active in this space?
So crypto and fintech, I think right now what you've seen as far as most crypto is that if you look at Bitcoin and where Bitcoin started, Bitcoin was supposed to be peer-to-peer electronic cash. Unfortunately and fortunately, Bitcoin actually didn't do that. They weren't successful at that, but what they were very successful at is creating an investment asset, an investment vehicle, which is good, especially for projects like ours with Tusk, is that that leaves the playing field for payments pretty much wide open for adoption. And so at least with our project, we're focused on the adoption side and versus more the investment side. So I think really with cryptocurrencies, you have investments and you have payments. And then I think the myriad of opportunities that blockchain as a technology to compete with centralized databases is also pretty amazing. So I think there's a lot of different angles here, both with the payments opportunities, the investment opportunities, but also with just dealing with decentralized access to information.
And Rob, I like what you're saying, referring back to Bitcoin. I know a lot of people prior were thinking that this is just a fluke, but it's progressive. Nothing is overnight. It was a beginning and something better is coming. Shadrach, coming to you, coming from South Africa, where the financial services industry is quite, progressive. Please tell us about your journey in the fintech industry.
Thank you kindly. As you've correctly stated earlier, having begun my journey with the Big Four, I had a front row view of seeing the bigger financial machinery and the audit machinery mechanized into action. But as Rob said, there's the investment side and there's a wider public side, which is more payment. So my last 10 years really has seen me deliver value as a solutionist, where across 8 sectors, I've been rolling out management consulting inputs until about a year and a half ago, I got to compare notes with IBM, which is which is a legacy firm with about more than a century in the game, and now seeking to leverage fintech and other levers. So we compared notes and said, listen, we've solved a solution across 8 sectors. We want to settle into the fintech space through decentralization and specifically blockchain for global trade. So if we can begin solving category Africa level problems and the big pain points. So I'm excited about solving macro situational challenges. But where the macro intersects with the micro, meaning the informal and the formal economy, that's where things get interesting for Africa. And from South Africa as a gateway into the rest of Africa, I realized that my passion for macro level challenges and fintech as an enabler or an agent of financial inclusion is best positioned. Hence, through blockchain, we are solving issues that keep awake 500,000 business owners on this continent. Wow.
I love the passion.
That's amazing. When you see the way Shadrach, the enthusiasm when it comes to this sector. So when we talk about fintech, let me go to Dr. Babatunde. You are the CEO of Fintech Association of Nigeria. Is the fintech sector thriving, most especially during this pandemic? And how do you think it will fare post-pandemic? What is the association main objective, seeing what the pandemic is doing?
Oh, thank you. So, I mean, for us as an association, we're driven by three objectives. The first one is connect, being able to bring together everybody within that tech space. So for us, we're an ecosystem association. Our membership cuts across 15 different sectors of the economy presently, and it's growing. The second one is to accelerate technological growth, while the last one is to advocate. That is, the first two are useless if there are no progressive regulatory reforms to support innovation and creativity within the tech space and the financial space. So for us, in terms of the environment, we think that COVID has been an enabler or a catalyst for financial inclusion, in the sense that people now, I mean, if you take Nigeria, and for a year from the moment the lockdown was released, banking laws were like a marketplace. People flooded the banks because they wanted to now make sure that they are on a digital platform to be able to do transactions. So I think that COVID has been an enabler. There's no doubt that there are its challenges. I mean, infrastructural issues, especially young startups had challenges during that period. But I think that the future is bright for the fintech space. When you look at Nigeria with 40 million people not yet financially included, that's a big space for people with solutions that can solve problems in that space. So I think that it can only get better. It's growing. And when you look at the country, in 2017, we had about $52 million in investment in the fintech space. In 2018, it grew to $107 million. In 2019, it was $459 million. And right now, 2020, we are talking about $270, $280 million in investment in the fintech space. So I think that it can only get better.
Doctor, I think you're speaking about a point that Rob alluded to earlier on before we went live, when he said that, you know, this has actually been an opportunity moment for his business as well. So Rob, coming back to you, are those who are speculating that the blockchain technology is the internet revolution of today. What are your thoughts on that? Do you agree with that statement? And why do you think technological development will be a game changer? And how will this impact global businesses?
Wow, that's a lot of stuff. I'd like to dovetail back into why I think COVID is actually good for crypto and fintech. And if anything, at least in my experience, is that it's actually eliminated some distractions where people can start focusing on developing new things. And I really mean that. I mean, just from a practical standpoint, if you're not going out to eat with your buddies and partying and going to clubs and stuff, you're sitting home thinking about stuff. But in addition, it's forced a lot of people to do exactly what we're doing right now. We're communicating across borders. And when you communicate across borders and when you develop relationships across borders, naturally what will flow from that will be more economic opportunities across borders. And then we start seeing, and more people start seeing, how crypto payments and other fintech applications from blockchain will enable that. We also see now, and more people are seeing, how the existing legacy systems prevent those cross-border economic opportunities from happening. So I think in a lot of ways, COVID in the pandemic has actually been driving this because it's eliminating distractions and bringing other elements to point. So I just think that's really important to discuss. As far as how I think blockchain is going to affect the world, I think especially, I think it's going to allow, much like the internet, and I'll talk specifically about how mobile devices and the internet. If you look at where most of the technology and the adoption of mobile devices, it did not come from Western countries initially, like the big Western countries like the United States. It was driven in Asia, in Africa, and in poor countries in Europe, because the legacy infrastructure was so expensive to try to use this new technology on. They just leapfrogged it and went to mobile. I think the same thing is going to happen from a regulatory standpoint from the West. I think personally, I'm very bearish on what's happening in the United States with the way we're approaching regulations. I'm very biased on this issue, but I believe that the American-driven legacy economic system, which does drive a lot of exclusion globally, is going to hold itself back because it's going to try to protect that legacy system. Our politicians are corrupt on both sides of the aisle. I don't care what people say. I live here. I know it. I've worked with politicians for a long time. They're all corrupt. I don't believe any of them. And the main job of politicians in the United States is to protect legacy, politically connected systems and corporations. And so because of that, I believe the United States is going to lag when it comes to crypto adoption and blockchain adoption. Whereas I think countries like Nigeria, for instance, can take this moment and either squander that opportunity or become a global leader by embracing this technology. And I believe in the United States, it's going to be done through regulation. I mean, you look at what FinCEN's doing, you look at the travel rule, and all these things that are coming out. All it is about protecting what they already have instead of embracing new technologies. And we're seeing kind of the opposite with where you have at least China embracing, blockchain technology in a very centralized, controlling way. And I'm not very excited about that, to be honest. But I think countries like in Africa and Nigeria, you guys right now have the opportunity to become a global leader in this technology. You got to choose to do it, but you can. And I really have a lot of confidence and faith that you will.
And I think great example for, Lee, if we talk about Lee, if we talk about M-Pesa, it's a case study now in a lot of universities, the success story of M-Pesa, like Rob is talking about, when, in Africa, we do take these technologies and we run with them. So I think the point he's saying is very valid. So yeah, I just wanted to highlight that.
Yeah, interesting. Even it happened in Nigeria, the payment processing startup that was acquired. That should be Paystack. So a lot of things are coming up. And Ayanda, let me, if you see, if you've been able to listen to conversations from the panelists, their contributions, it's like we are in the blockchain space. We're seeing that the COVID, everybody who are in the fintech and blockchain space have been seeing the impact of the pandemic, even though it has a negative impact in other sectors, the more. But when it comes to the fintech and the blockchain, I see from their conversation is and what we are seeing in the blockchain sector is as if it's even making this sector thrive better. So let me move to Shedrack. What exactly do you think should be done? We are talking about the theme for this panel is convergence of blockchain and fintech. So when we're talking about convergence, so what exactly do you think should be done to carry blockchain and other emerging tech along in the fintech space?
Thank you kindly. If you were to look at the trajectory of the automobile or the automotive sector, there are parallels to the current fourth industrial revolution that is unfolding. And I'm going to use 3 areas of focus. I will then expand on 2, and then I will wrap it up in terms of what can be done to catalyze or oil the slow wheels that are overdue to be sped up along through technology. If you are to look at the 3 words, it's accuracy, it's automation, and of course it's access. Those are the 3 words I'll focus on. I will unpack further on accuracy and access, because those are the pain points that tend to drive democratization, inclusion, and all those sustainable development goals that we carry as a society. I remember the words of the late Henry Ford, who said, if I had asked my customers what they are looking for, they would have asked for a faster horse, because they wouldn't know better. So if you look at where the accounting industry is, if you look at where the audit sector is, you find that there's a need for an intervention at scale in order to ensure that in a similar way that the ledger, the physical ledger evolved from physical onto Excel. And now everybody has invested in becoming Excel black belt in the last 10 years, those that are in that space. But now we are overdue, because those Excel best practices have not evolved the world forward to drive inclusion at scale. So we need now to evolve towards machine learning, towards IoT, towards all this emerging tech that are not really coming here to shut down jobs, but they are here, even as Rob has touched on it, that our lack of deeply entrenched legacy systems at scale as a continent, much similar to Nigeria, across the 4 corners, It's our advantage. We can leapfrog these emerging technologies and ensure that just like how we move from the horse into the automobile, now the world is better for it. We are connecting better. And of course, Rob also mentioned a point there to say we are now experiencing borderless integration and borderless meetings. You know, Doctors Without Borders, how will technology evolve us to now have accountants without borders, to have auditors without borders, to now have these forums without borders, where you can have digital, where you can have technology without borders. So in short, increased accuracy and enabled by automation at scale will now lower the barriers for a wider democratization. Case in point with M-Pesa that's been mentioned around this table. Kenya, as East Africa, that East Africa country, was sitting at roughly above 20 to 26% financial inclusion in terms of the banked. But come M-Pesa, now that figure skyrocketed through mobile payments and inclusion at scale to more than 85%. So in summary, for the handling of data need to be democratized. The handling of accounting books. Now you've got solution called a bot keeper. From the age-old bookkeeper, now bots are now coming in to help more startups, more SMEs to now receive democratized services. And that's the Africa we want, where the barriers are lowered, where the borders are lowered, currency commonalities are joined, but we must allow technology to do a heavy lifting so that we can enjoy the ideation and the thought leadership in a cockpit in this fashion. Thank you.
Oh, Shadrach, I like what you say. I wish these bots were there in like 15 years ago when I was working for a hedge fund and reconciling portfolios manually on Excel. That would have been really helpful and saved me a lot of time, I can say. And just to, piggyback on what Lee was asking you, I mean, you are a very savvy technocrat. You read the headlines, you know what is being said about the fintech industry. You give us your insights and your opinion on what do you think on the recent developments and the news headlines about the fintech industry.
Thank you kindly. And you know what, as I respond to that great question indeed, let me agree with you that the emerging technologies, fintech in that scope, is at least 100 years late to arrive on this continent, because case in point, we would have known what happened to our minerals. We would have also known what happened to now what's known as illicit currency outflows, but that's a story for another day. Let me jump right into it. If you look at the headlines at the moment, there are some great quality acquisitions, particularly happening on the Nigeria's front. Last year, we had the first $200 million acquisition for a startup in fintech that happened in Nigeria. This year, about a month or two ago, a second cherry picking happened in that same quality category. Obviously, we are hoping that beyond the acquisitions or beyond the collaboration, there's going to be a lot more inclusive leadership so that you don't have the likes of Visa or any other legacy firm coming in to do a cut and paste on the continent. But you know what? Whatever leadership decisions or culture, co-creation culture happens in the C-suite, we will observe, but great quality acquisitions, even the likes of Jeff Bezos are now moving into Africa with cherry picking some really sought after fintech stocks. So that's on the acquisition side. And on the regulation, we have seen in the last, to agree with Dr. Babatunde, that there is a drive towards reforms. There's a drive towards a catalytic effect in order for reforms to catch up with digitizations, to catch up with the leapfrogging that COVID has brought us into. So we are seeing more and more collaborative posture from regulators. I mean, even in South Africa, very recently, cryptocurrencies are now regarded as a financial product. And I know that both in Nigeria, in South Africa and also on the East and on the North Africa part, the central banks are moving forward to look very closely into central bank digital currencies as a norm to help once again do the heavy lifting of moving Africa's economies forward. That very prophetic picture that Rob painted is going to be realized when Nigeria can step forward, where South Africa can step forward, and together as brethren, we can do the heavy lifting. That's going to happen as regulators are coming to the party, policy frameworks are being adjusted in order to leapfrog a way forward. And last but not least, we are seeing a scenario where the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDG, benchmarked remittances to say, you know what, fintech is coming to the party to actually fast track the realization of lowering the remittances burden in terms of fees that are collected by burgeoning middlemen in between. Their benchmark was if by 2030 remittances fees collected, they come down to 3%. That will be a kumbaya moment. We'll live happily ever after. The good news is decentralization within fintech and blockchain has realized that dream in 2020. We are already seeing movement where certain use cases have already lowered that fence, have already demolished that border, much like America about 20 years ago caught on to open offices. We are now seeing openness, decentralization, but on a digital front and scale. Those are just some of the cherry-picked highlights in terms of what's happening on the landscape. Thanks for a great question once again.
Thank you very much, Shedrack, for that wonderful insight. So I'll move to Rob. You know, you are in the blockchain space. You've been in the blockchain space, and we are talking about all these acquisitions, and they are mostly fintech startups. So you being in the blockchain space, what are on the frontier in this space? You're a leader in this blockchain space. So what steps would you recommend upcoming startups take to improve their businesses in this niche?
Well, let's start by getting out there. I would say when it comes to startups, I've been an entrepreneur for a long time. What I'm seeing the lack of in the crypto space, and it is one of the opportunities we've been focusing on exploiting, is that you got a lot of these crypto projects and blockchain projects. And if you go look at their team pages, for instance, you'll see that most of their teams are just developers. And that it's really unbalanced. And I think part of the problem is when you're kind of closing that last mile of crypto adoption, as I call it, you need to have people that are on board that are into things like marketing, business development, sales, for instance. And I think when it comes to crypto, because of the heavy developer-led nature of many of these projects, they're missing all those opportunities on how do they get adoption. So you see a lot of projects that are amazing out there that have really great technology, really good, insightful tools, and they got nobody using them yet. And they have no strategy to get people to use them. For example, let's just look at Ethereum. You know, Vitalik, who is one of the, the co-founders of Ethereum, does he ever go to industry-related conferences? If for instance, if I were a startup in the crypto space, I would ask, or I would say, if someone else is a crypto, entrepreneur startup, and I would say, who's your customer for your product? And what is your strategy for getting them? What problems are you solving, and for what industry? And when these founders can't answer any of those basic questions, I know they're going to have a very difficult time. So for instance, Vitalik, if you had to ask Vitalik who his customers are, one, he probably would say he doesn't have customers, but I think he should. And so who is the intended market for Ethereum? Right? And somebody needs to answer that question, because if you don't answer that question, you can't develop a strategy or a program to get your solution in front of your customer. So I think the big thing that I would recommend to startup entrepreneurs in this space is solve a problem. And once you've identified a problem and you have the solution to that problem, then you need to work really hard on how you're going to present your solution to its intended market. And I think that's the big gap that I'm seeing with a lot of the startups in this space.
I think that's great that actually, we can have a balanced view that there are opportunities, but there's also work to be done. And that requires different skills rather than the technological skills that we're familiar with. So I think it's a great point to highlight, because I think a lot of people are afraid that, you know, you have to be so techno, yet you spoke about marketing skills, sales skills. That doesn't necessarily require someone to have the technical capabilities. So I think that's a very balanced view of seeing how, you know, from capability perspective, this needs to evolve as well, Rob.
Yeah, I think it's interesting in the United States, for instance, and this is the niche that we kind of exploited. But when we started asking before we started our project almost 3 years ago, I asked the question, why hasn't mass adoption occurred? And we went down a rabbit hole. I like to ask questions and then try to come up with the answers. You know, and a lot of people have ideas on why that is. But one of the problems with like why crypto mass adoption hasn't occurred in the United States is the fact that cryptocurrency doesn't actually solve problems for most people in the West. We don't have payments problems in the West. We don't have banking access problems in the West outside a few key industries. So if you're trying to if your idea of getting and marketing Bitcoin, for instance, is hassling Starbucks baristas or Uber drivers or your grandmother, I think, one, you're going to make all those people upset and frustrated because crypto doesn't solve any problems for those people. And in fact, crypto actually creates more problems and creates more stress for most of those people in the West. So when we were looking at markets to get mass adoption in the United States, we had to decide we said, if you're going to get mass adoption, you need to start with an industry that has a recognized problem with existing payment systems. And inside the United States and probably the West, there's only a few industries that do have a recognized problem with payments. And in the United States, they're all distasteful industries to somebody. And so I think this is key. You got to recognize that if you have to focus on solving a problem. If you just, you've heard the term build it and they will come, right? And I believe that's a myth. Build it and they will come does not work. It's a movie line. That's all it is. Even if you have the greatest solution to the greatest problem, if you don't have a strategy to bring that solution to market, you're not going to be successful. And I think that was the big gap. And so that's kind of how we view crypto mass adoption, is you have to focus on solving recognized problems for people. And then you have to figure out how you're going to get those solutions in front of those people.
Great. And I think Dr. Babatunde, carrying on from Rob's point about adoption and solving real life situations, you know, how has digitalization improved the agricultural policy and administration in Nigeria? And what efforts is your organization making towards persuading the government to implement blockchain regulations in the country?
Thank you for that question. Let me start from the last part. We have the Nigerian Information Technology Development Agency, NITDA, and last month they came up with the blockchain adoption strategy for Nigeria. So, I mean, they're looking at something that cuts across both public and private sector, which, I mean, it's a good development. The document has been reviewed. I mean, it was sent even to us as the association to have a look at it and have our input in it. In addition to that, you have like the Securities and Exchange Commission has already, I mean, set up its own committee on blockchain. Right now, we have policies to regulate digital assets, crowdfunding. So there's a lot being done in terms of that space from the regulatory point of view. And we hope that this time government will actually take it seriously. I think that I can see that drive to see that there's a need to, because I mean, it's either you innovate or you die. So you either jump up, you either be on the train now or you're left behind. So I think that that also is being, there's that catch up that government is trying to, the regulators are trying to do. When you look at the, agricultural space, there's a lot happening in terms of trying to improve on mechanization. But I think that when you look at population growth and food production, they are running at different paces. So for me, I think that mechanization is not a solution to agricultural problem in Nigeria. Is technology. I mean, there's a difference between mechanization and technology. When you take like the Netherlands, they're the second largest exporter of food in the world, but they are probably one of the smallest countries compared to, they have 43,000 square kilometers compared to United States that has 9.3 million square kilometers. I know they're doing technology, and I think that that's the way to go. We have a very vibrant young population who do not want to go to the farms the way agriculture is being done right now. We also have an aging farming population that in the next 10 years, if we don't adopt technology, we are going to go hungry. So I think that to adopt technology for the agricultural space, a lot of been done in terms of payment systems within the agricultural space, farmers being able to access inputs using digitization platforms for that. But I think that it goes beyond that to actually adopting technology, using new biotechnology principles for food production to be able to solve the agriculture, to deal with the agricultural space. So I think that we need to start looking at that from a very more serious perspective, because population is growing faster than food production and mechanization can't catch up. That's just the reality. So technology is the way to go in terms of agricultural production.
Interesting. Thank you very much, Dr. Babatunde. So for our audience, we still have a $100 giveaway. So we'll be doing that towards the end of this panel. So let me move to Shadrach. Shadrach, how do you think technology is upgrading the accounting, data, and machine learning sector with your experience in this sector?
Thank you kindly. You know, when it comes to data, which some refer to as the new gold in this era of digitization, the pace or the swiftness at which decisions must be made is far outpacing the archaic or legacy forms of gathering, responding, storing, or deploying data. So if you're to look at very useful tools such as decentralization through blockchain, IoT, Internet of Things, and of course, cloud computing and machine learning, those mechanisms are moving into the space to almost democratize access to data responses or data deployments that are perhaps, I could even safely say, on par with the global grade that the CIA in the US has established, where the CIA looks at three things when it comes to data: the gathering element, is it from credible sources, and was it actually gathered in credible manner? So one has to police that corridor in terms of whether it be the agricultural sector or any sector. Where is the availability of data? Number one, I mean, I'm not going to mention the country, even though some of you already know about it. There is a highly contested scenario. Well, the country is the US, where a certain state was going to be under attack from a hurricane, and science caved in when it came under attack by certain people that shall remain unnamed, that basically went to loggerheads in terms of that data. They say, don't listen to the weather science or this collection. And they basically went headbutting with that. But what happened, the hurricane, on appointment, I don't know who said the appointment, arrived and rummaged through the state of Alabama. So the sanctity or sacredness of data is number one, that the CIA actually has established as a global grade, number one. Number two, the storage of it. Will it be tamper-proof? Now, their definition of tamper-proof is not something that a startup could access. It's not something that an SME could access. It's not something that a government in Africa can access. I mean, as recent as last year, South Africa has received data breaches at investment bank level, your Stanley, at various institutions, including the government. So the collection of data and the what do you call it, the policing of that framework, that corridor where data comes in, has to remain clean. We cannot involve edits in between by middlemen that are invisible. That's number two. So the gathering, sacredness, the storage, tamper-proofing, decentralization is able to receive, to actually avail that. The last part that the CIA has put in place as a global grade method in data handling, irrespective of a sector, is will this data be made available when it's needed by those that need it on the front lines, be it the front line of whichever sector that will enable careful decision making that evolves the sector forward, that allows inclusion, that allows wider participation and adoption. So those three pillars really are all touched in: the gathering, the storage, the tamper-proofing, and security, and of course, the last one, the deployment when needed to areas where it's being needed. Dr. Babatunde was just talking about a collective collaboration where certain white papers or policy frameworks are being aligned. Now, that is the gathering. Those are highly credible institutions of government and society. The availing of that and disseminating of it through a decentralized ledger is what gives us democratized access without borders and without silos. That's how technology is fast-tracking the data sphere of society. Thank you kindly.
Thank you, gentlemen. I'm just conscious of the fact that we have 10 minutes left in this discussion. And just to now head back to you, Dr. Babatunde, you know, based on what Shadrach has said and Rob has said and yourself has said in the last couple of minutes, you know, looking forward, you know, in terms of your organization, what plans are there? Are there any plans in place or thoughts towards how you better support fintech startups in Nigeria and potentially in the rest of Africa?
Well, yes. I mean, if we look at, for us in Nigeria, one of the big challenges that fintechs have, well, there are two. I mean, one is regulation issues, which has to do with licensing. The second one is funding. We don't have funds to support startups at pre-seed and seed stages. And that's because the average Nigerian investor does not understand intellectual property. They would rather invest in real estate or in the stock market. So how do we now ensure that we can have funding support for startups, especially at these stages? And for us as an association, we're already setting up a committee that's looking at how we can have funding, local funding for startups, which is really critical. You have a lot of young people with nice ideas, and because they don't get that support, they just, it kind of dies away. And I think that's really critical. When you look at Nigeria, in the last 3-4 years, 99% of investments have been FDIs. I mean, really, it has its own risk of foreign exchange. There's exchange risk. I mean, there's effect on our foreign reserves. So how do we start developing local funding, encouraging local investors to support fintech startup? The second one, which is regulation, is we are working regularly, I mean, with all the regulators. We now have what you call a regulator forum, which brings together all representatives of regulators in the country and operators, where we can share ideas, we can talk about issues before it goes public. That's where we can bridge the gap between technology and innovation. So those are things that we're trying to put in place to ensure that we can support the startups. We believe as we do that, the issues of licenses, we can say it can be relaxed to make it easier for startups. The central bank is setting up a sandbox now. We think that that will help to bring in more younger people and into the space and solve some of the licensing, cost of license. For the way you look at it, you need $100,000. That's the cheapest license you can get from the central bank if you're going to be fintech in the payment area. That's a whole lot of money for a young person living in school. So how do we deal with that? We think that the sandbox will help to be able to help these younger people to come into the fintech space. So those are two areas that we're working on as the association to ensure that we can help startups. And we hope that Nigeria is also a member of the African Fintech Network, and that can cut across the whole of Africa. If we can achieve it here, then we can do that across Africa.
Interesting, nice one. So I'll still go back to our audience. If you have questions, you can start dropping your questions. We'll be picking, our panelists will be helping us pick the best questions who will stand a chance to win part of the $100. So we are trying to round up because our time is no longer on our side. So let me go back to you, Rob. With respect to TUSC project, what progress and technical advancements have you been working on recently?
So technological advancement, the latest thing that we're doing on the technological side is we just announced a partnership with Project Hydro. So we're looking at leveraging some of their digital identity and kind of leveraging that as far as our main target market. So a lot of people don't know that we're not focused on being major innovators in technology with blockchain. There's thousands of blockchain projects that all are innovative. I think the big thing that we're trying to do is get adoption. And so we think that we don't need to build more features yet with our project technologically, because there's already lots of people that have built all sorts of amazing technologies that have no customers, no users, and they have no strategy to get them. Our focus is a little different. Our focus is actually trying to solve real world problems and getting real adoption with crypto. And then as we grow, adding more innovations. Now we have a tremendous roadmap for the next 5-10 years. If we're successful, I literally want to put satellites in orbit, literally. And so we got a lot of interesting things we want to do long term, but those are all predicated on early success. And so to us, we're not super innovative yet. And we're in an early, emerging technological field. But as far as, are we doing something cutting edge compared to other blockchains right now? No. What we're doing, technologically speaking, what we're trying to do is actually get basically focusing on getting people using our crypto and actually getting real world people leveraging crypto for day-to-day payments, which no other blockchains have really been doing. And so we have a strategy for doing that. And then over time, if we're successful, we're going to do everything and literally go to the moon. But we're focused on actually getting people using it first. And so it's just kind of a different strategy in how we're getting out there.
Great, and I think there's nothing wrong with dreaming big, Rob. You never know where it will take you, right? To the moon.
Exactly.
To the moon and back. Just coming back to you, Shadrach, in a nutshell, what would you say, is the next digital innovation in the fintech space for fintech startups? Let's talk 2021 and beyond. What would you say, are the key digital innovations that fintech startups need to look at or leverage with fintech technology?
Thank you kindly. If you are looking at the long horizon, I've got a habit of counting Saturdays. So just below 735 Saturdays from now, we will be arriving at 1st January 2035. That's in 15 years. And in that trajectory, we will see Africa's population double from the current 1 billion or so to about 1.8 to 2 billion. So the type of focus areas from our fintech desk as we deploy blockchain in supply chain for enabling trade, we are using, or we are mechanizing through an obsession with decentralization of supply chains to ensure that in the salon sector, those 2.5 million families that rely on the global trade of the hair business are not going to be muscled out of the room. The 33 million smallholder or family-owned farmers on the continent of Africa must not be monopolized out of the economic dinner table. That's why we want to edit how supply chains are currently configured in order to lower the barriers to entry and enable those smallholder farmers a seat at the table. And also on the subsequent end, South Africa and Nigeria, they share this fact. They are both experiencing a post-crop production food wastage that is between 30 to 35% a year. So when we deploy our blockchain as the what do you call it, assessment at scale to find out where all these wastages and blind spots are. So we are going to be deploying our truth machine, our trust machine to help at scale. And we've been approached by 4 universities that are saying we've got development agencies that want to solve Africa scale or Africa level problems. So in in the next 15 years, 734 Saturdays, I'm going to be a busy man, but I'm also going to be a very obsessed man who's focused on one thing alone, editing Africa's supply chain as for the global trade, to see inclusion, to see less wastage, and to secure more smallholders a seat at the economic table. Thank you.
Interesting. Been counting Saturdays, maybe to start from tomorrow. As for those of the audience who are dropping questions, you could drop them the Q&A session, so we'll be able to go through them, because we are taking the last questions from us to the panelists. Finally, let me go to Dr. Babatunde. Briefly, we heard that you had a very joyful work culture during your working days in First Bank Nigeria. So can you share with us some of the fun episodes of your workplace?
Well, I mean, that's a long while ago. So maybe if we look at our fun time. So I mean, my background's my first 2 degrees in agriculture. So working with First Bank was working as an agri finance officer. And I think that the fun, I mean, there were no GPSs. So, and you had to locate farmers' sites. So, I mean, you go into an area, huge expanse of land, and you have to be able to know where the farmers you're funding, where their exact locations were. And during that period, Nigeria had this program, the Central Bank had this program, the Agricultural Credit Guarantee Scheme, where farmers were given 5,000 naira. Now, 5,000 naira then was like $500, you know, and that's what you needed to do 1 hectare of land. And farmers were given this money, and some of them were defaulting, and we had to look for these farmers in the bush. And I think that the fun for me was a farmer that we had been looking for months. We eventually located him, went very early in the morning, like about 6 a.m. And when he saw us, he started running away, and we had to chase him inside the cocoa plantation. So for me, I think it's funny. I mean, when I look back at it now, I mean, it's like fun. I mean, because you needed to collect the money back, and you had to collect it back whichever way, because your performance was dependent on the amount of money you could collect back. So if you have to chase the farmer to catch him, you had no choice but to do that. I mean, those are some experiences I probably will never forget.
That's such a very humorous story, Doctor. I can just I'm trying to visualize chasing a farmer in the African wild. That's very funny. Thank you for that. Thank you, panel, gentlemen. That was very insightful. The time just flew by, and we literally have, I think, about 8-9 minutes left of questions. So, Lee, why don't we do this? Why don't I kick off the first question, because I have a really burning question to ask, and then we take the remaining questions from the chat box. My first question is, Shadrach, with supply chain, in the space of supply chain that you're talking about, we've seen with the pandemic that supply chain basically went out of spin. Organizations, especially retailers, went into shock. The orders couldn't come through, the inventories were not either unavailable, or they were so high in the warehouse they couldn't do anything about it. So looking at what the pandemic did to the supply chain industry and the supply chain function in organizations, how do you foresee blockchain addressing some of these issues going forward, should we encounter another pandemic?
Thank you kindly. That's a brilliant. That's a brilliant burning question. We refer to, among ourselves as a team, we refer to pandemics, particularly COVID. We refer to COVID not so much as as a biological disaster that it is, and the head count of lives lost is tragic. But what happened is we refer to COVID as the inspector, much similar to how we refer to storms and hurricanes as the ultimate building inspectors. So you asked the question, how did COVID sort of destroy the existing supply chains? Sadly, or rather interestingly, COVID did not destroy our supply chain sectors. Before I mention how decentralization and what do you call it, blockchain will actually close the gap. COVID, like a very faithful building inspector, revealed that the way we had configured our supply chain systems or built them was very much outdated and to an extent very corrupt, because it was favoring monopolies at the expense of the little farmer, at the expense of, by the way, the little farmer who has got a dream to one day put their crops into the bigger supply chain and supply the chain hotel, supply the bigger retail. So it was a big boys club, number one. Two, there was a rush about 20, 30 years ago where people were wanting to bring costs down, go set up office in China, everywhere around the world, cost cutting. But the cost cutting came back to cut the decision makers when they least expect, because take BMW. BMW at the beginning of COVID had 12,000 suppliers across 60 countries mechanizing to produce one car with parts and everything. COVID comes and says, maybe you shouldn't have cost that much. Maybe you needed to evolve onto the blockchain through decentralization and a borderless framework. So blockchain is returning us back to a deepened human connection, and also setting up micro, not macro, micro supply chains in your vicinity rather than setting up shop across the world. But how also, as a truth machine, you will know exactly, I mean, each of us own vehicles here. You'll know where the parts came from. You will know even where your produce that's in your fridge, you know where it came from. So in the past, it was on a need-to-know basis. If they say organic, you better believe them. If they say vegan and they charge you 5 times, just good luck finding out if that's vegan. So COVID revealed that there were too many lies in the supply chain. There were too many inflationary incurrences. So now we need to go back. We need a truth machine. We need a collaboration. We need the ecosystem that Dr. Babatunde is speaking about. And we need a digital infrastructure to bring visibility, transparency, and truth. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So Ayanda, how we have a lot of questions coming in, though they are coming in at the chat session, not on the Q&A sessions. How are we going to be doing? Are we going to be picking the questions for one after the other?
Yeah, I think, yes, I think let's choose one for Rob, one for Dr. Babatunde, if that's okay.
Okay,
I don't wanna...
let me, there are some questions here. We have, this one is from Obianuju. It said, what do you think the profit return of fintech is in the next 5 years? So Babatunde, maybe you could take that.
Well, that's an interesting question. So, I mean, should I forecast? Maybe the easiest way to look at it is that let me take Paystack. Y Combination invested $120,000 in 2016 in Paystack and walks away today with $12 million. So I think that's how good fintech can be if you get it right. I think that's the only way I can answer that question. That's how it's. So once you have the right product and you're well positioned, the returns are good. I mean, that's the only way I can answer that question.
I think just to follow up on that question, Dr. Babatunde, there's a question here from Mr. Solution. It's saying, you talked about sandboxes as some of the testing grounds deployed by the Nigerian government and the government of some African nations towards checking the impact of the blockchain technology. Are there facilities on ground to help ensure that these sandboxes are permissionless and trustless to limit interference?
Okay, I actually had responded to him in the chat box. But,
okay.
But the sandboxes are not yet activated, but the regulations and the processes are in circulation for us to review them. I think that, I mean, there are a lot of inputs going into it. We're yet to see the final document, but I want to believe those are issues that were raised by various people as input into those documents. I expect that they will be in the final document. So what I say, I mean, the fact that they're actually moving in that direction, it's a good development.
President, we still have other questions here. Let me read them out. Maybe the one who could answer, we still have like 2 minutes, or others who could read them out and see the ones who select for the giveaway. So let me read this one from DRA. It says, which specific sectors of applications do you believe fintech firms offer that have the greatest potential to have material influence on the industry impact? I don't know. Do you understand the question? Maybe anyone can take it. Shadrach, you can also take it, or Rob.
Just repeat the question again. Did you get the question, Rob?
I didn't hear it now. I'm sorry.
So which specific sectors or applications do you believe fintech firms offer that have the greatest potentials to have material influence on the industry impact? That's what the person is asking, Terry.
So I would say, at least I think DeFi is interesting long term. But I think the current executions at DeFi are just about people trying to get rich quick without creating any value. But I think what I would like to see going forward, and this is, I get my little crystal ball, is again, what problems do these really solve? So right now, DeFi, in my opinion, much of the DeFi stuff out there is a casino, right? People are trying to get rich quick, and a lot of people are getting wrecked in the process. What I think could be amazing, and this is the hard part, is how do you offer, for instance, loans that are not collateralized to people that really need it? Because if you look at how a lot of the DeFi is right now, people are loaning money, but the problem is they already have lots more collateral. So those people really don't need loans. People that need loans don't have collateral. So how do you do underwriting in a decentralized way? And I think whoever can figure out how to do decentralized underwriting of loans, and even more important, I think the decentralized underwriting of insurance. And so if you can figure that out, and that's the hard part. And I mean, if you could look at some of the microloan, more centralized microloan, applications that are out there, Kiva and things like that. I think if you can figure out how to do that in a decentralized way, that will revolutionize commerce and insurance and finance across the planet. But I also think those are very, very difficult things to sort out. But if I was a DeFi project, I would be looking at how do you deal with the decentralized underwriting of both insurance and loan products.
Just, Ayanda, our time is up. How do we go about the questions? Maybe our panelists will be able to go through some of the questions on the chat box to be able to pick the ones they feel is the best questions. Maybe Dr. Babatunde, maybe you could scroll on the chat box and see questions you could pick with the person's name. We'll be able to. So we're going to be picking 5 good questions. Yeah,
I think we have a good one here from Jado that says.
Let the panelists speak first. Let the panelists speak first. So who are going to be the lucky winners, the 5 lucky winners? Ayanda, how do you see it? Who do you think are going to be the lucky ones?
There are a lot of good questions, by the way, and that's why I was wanting to just read the last one, because thank you, audience, you really have given us some really good questions. It's unfortunate we can't answer all of them, but good luck to whoever wins. I think you all deserve to win.
Yes, some of the questions will be able to, maybe the panelists could be able to go through and answer them and forward them to them. So we are still waiting who is going to be the first winner. So I don't know, the panelists are still going through the questions on the chat box. We're just looking for 5 good questions. Just pick one.
I've got a question I picked up here from Jado. Thank you for this great opportunity. I have 2 questions. I'll pick up the first one. Fintech companies fall into either business to consumer sales model, that's B2C or business to business model. And each model has its own challenges. As experts in the field, what are the challenges in this industry and what can be the solution?
Which one did you pick, or who again did you pick? What's the name of the person that asked the question?
Jado.
That will be Jado.
Oh, Jado. Jado, Jado is our first winner.
Jado, that's
yes.
Yes.
Okay. Dr. Babatunde and Rob, you can pick one person each.
Well, I think that I don't think it's only B2C and B2B. If you look at really what does decentralized technology offer is P2P. And I think ultimately that's what decentralization talks about. I think when it comes to at least business to business, I do think blockchain offers, let's just say, when you're dealing with, for instance, logistics is interesting, right? Everybody talks about the logistics. You can set up, non-permissioned or walled blockchains for, say, the shipping industry, so that you can have participants in that industry that may not trust each other, for instance, but the blockchain permits them to trustlessly do business with one another. So you may have, international players from, all over the planet. They get into this, semi-walled or semi-permissioned blockchain. I think that's a huge benefit, but there's challenges.
Rob, which question are you picking?
That was the number one.
Who asked it, please, the name?
Let's see, who asked that? That was Jado.
Jado is already a winner, so let's go for another one.
You should explain the rule, probably.
Okay, so can I take one? I'll take, there's somebody here called Elite. Blockchain offers the opportunity to overhaul existing banking infrastructure, speed settlement, and streamline stock exchanges. The question is, how can fintech convergence with blockchain stop this disruption, and how can both sectors coexist? So I'll pick that.
That's interesting. Elite is our second winner. So we still have about 3 more winners to go. Rob, who you can pick another person?
I don't know. I kind of like Jado. I'm gonna be honest. He's really active.
Shadrach, you can pick another person. We don't have time. Let's pick 5 questions and go.
Let's see. Okay. What are some of the data security issues fintech firms are facing, especially when the pandemic period, and how is your project solving them?
Who asked the question?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think with data security, I think ultimately what you're seeing is, the downsides. Like there are downsides to, decentralized technologies and blockchain, and I like to be open about them. I think trustlessness is a tough cookie to crack. And that's because, let's think about it, right? People want to do business with people they know, like, and trust. That's sales 101. And when you say you're going to cut that out of the equation, one, I don't think that's natural, because people want to do business with people they know. And so I think it's really hard, especially with all the scammers out there in this trustless environment, in this decentralized anonymous environment. I think what ends up happening is that's really tough. And I think that's not going to be the way things go down eventually, because that goes against what I believe human nature. In the pandemic, though, what you're seeing is you got a lot more people that are desperate. And so people that are desperate are more likely to fall for scams. And these are low-tech scams. They're promises of getting rich quick. They're promises of getting something for a super deal that's not, they're trying to sell you something that's at a super duper price. And so I think that because of the pandemic, there's a lot of fear, insecurity, and people that are really, really hurting and struggling out there economically. And so I think it's just that basic decentralized, anonymous world that blockchain and crypto give us, lend themselves for scammers to leverage that to their benefit.
Okay, Rob, who asked the question that you are explaining?
It was Jado again.
That was Jado. It's not a question.
Jado again. Shadrach, are you picking any other person? Dr.
Yes, I've picked a question here. Dita Frank. Dita Frank asked, I understand the second part of the question better. The fintech industry, can the industry have political and socio-ecological responsibilities for the long-term development of a country? And should we even expect such responsibilities out of fintech? And the answer is yes, of course, because you know, just like how Rob was mentioning earlier, that trust, we do business with people that we trust. Blockchain is able to scale that trust. And in this case, fintech, unless our technological advancements are good for the planet and they are actually good for the greater good, or they can deploy tech for social good, there'll be no sustainability in that. That's a great point. Economies must embrace that, countries must embrace that, and Africa must use this emerging tech boom to close the trust deficit that has given us awards on the Global Corruption Index. I think we need to stop collecting that award and deploy emerging tech for social good and environmental good.
Congratulations to Dr. Frank.
Could I jump in on that question too, real quick?
Yeah, sure.
I think ultimately decentralized technologies are actually bad for countries, at least for the governments, because what ends up happening is decentralized technologies pull out middlemen. They pull out and how does government corrupt, right? Think about how does government corruption work? Many times, at least in Western government corruption, I don't know how it is in Africa, but it is here, is government places itself as a gatekeeper with the ability to pick winners and losers in all aspects of the economy and banking. And decentralized technologies pulls politicians out of that decision-making because it gets rid of those middlemen. It gets rid of those boundaries that are artificially created by politicians. And so if you say, how is a blockchain good for governments, for instance, I think they're bad for government because it actually undermines government power. But I think it's good for people because it empowers people at the local level and reduces government corruption. So I guess when we're talking about what's good for a country, you have to ask yourself, is weakening the power of your government a good thing for your country? And I wanted to say there's a nuance there that I think should be addressed.
There are a lot of debates going on around that.
I love the point. I love the point that Rob raised, and without expanding on it due to time, so we can allow the wider discussion. You know, when I was in school many moons ago, I heard a very simplified part of democracy. It was said to be, this is a simplified, watered down version. It's a government by the people, for the people. So yes, I agree. If a government is leaning more forward an authoritarian posture away from a democratic position, it's going to have a tough day at the office. But if government would allow the people that actually put that government in place to better have visibility into the government framework, maybe not immediately, but in the long term, your crystal ball might reveal that we will live happily ever after. In the meantime, it's gonna be pain. In the meantime, it's gonna be scary, but down the road, we might just have that kumbaya moment.
Agreed.
Exactly. So we still have 2 more questions to pick. Who are we picking again? Rob, you've been picking Jado. Jado have been asking a lot of good questions. You could try another person. Babatunde, you could try picking one more so that we go. I didn't want.
Okay, so I'll pick Micro. Says fintech have provided several solutions to many problems financially, no doubt, but there are still numerous challenges, especially fraud. So what are some of the solutions put in place to solve online fraud seen constantly in the space? I'll pick that. I think the issue of fraud is something that we're going to live with forever. I mean, as we come up with new solutions, cyber fraudsters will also come up with new ideas on how to defraud people. But when you look at most cases of fraud is because, like Rob said, people want to get rich quick and they fall for some of these scams. So that the operators will keep doing their best to put in security features, but users also must learn that you don't make quick money. You must, when you see things that don't make sense, don't just fall into it. So thank you.
Interesting. Congratulations to Microbe. Microbe is our latest winner. So we are looking for the last winner. Who is going to be this lucky person? Rob, I would love that to come from you.
So let's see, Hyder, the second question. Can I do that one?
Who was the question? Who asked it?
Let's see, it's from Hyder Duray or Heretier.
Yeah.
I'm American, I can't pronounce anything.
That's correct. That's correct. I think you're on the right track, Rob. You can go
Okay,
ahead.
so the second part is how can we use blockchain to connect with other parts of our market to find efficiencies that go beyond our firm to a market level? And that goes back, I think, to at least what I kind of like to think about is the marketing, right? How do you get your blockchain solution in front of people? And how do you build that community? Let's start with what we're doing right now here today. Right. This is how you get out to there. That is how you get the word out and how you build your community. I can tell you, especially without a huge marketing budget, like with our project, we don't have a huge marketing budget yet. You got to beat the doors. You got to knock on the doors. You got to fight. You got to like go and literally do the groundwork. And I come back down to even with blockchain and cryptocurrencies, you got to do sales. Right? How do you build sales and how do you connect with people online? So for instance, with our project, we are rolling out a new phase of going to influencers in our industry because we're industry focused with our project. And so one of the things that we're doing, in fact, we have two confirmed influencers. We're sponsoring their YouTube channels and things beginning of December. And so that's just so I like one with crypto projects and Fintech projects, you got to narrow your focus down, right? And so this is just marketing 101. So for instance, I'm old here, I got a little gray beard now, but I remember when Amazon was still a bookstore, 25 years ago. And they started with books. They planned to expand outwards from books. Like they always knew they wanted to grow into other industries, but they started and laser focused their energies in a market they thought that they could get competitive advantage of and disrupt. And so I think even with blockchain space, even if you're a decentralized community project, you need to think like a startup. And how do you product to market? So I think one, go back to figuring out, your market strategy, right? It's like what problem are you solving? And who are you solving it for? Then you want to ingratiate yourselves with the influencers and the top people in that industry so that if you can convince them that you're a good person to work with or your project solves a solution, they themselves will help promote it to that industry. And I think it does come back to that trust factor in many respects. But I think if you narrow your focus down to one particular area, you can be a lot more successful in building that out.
Interesting. That's very interesting. So it's Heritia there that asked that question. So Heritia is our last winner. Congratulations, everybody's the winner. So if you are one of the winners, you could forward the questions you asked to the chat right now and your Ethereum wallet, so that we'll be able to send, or you could also reach out to the admin. So thank you very much. It has been a very great insight and good questions from our audience. We would like to give a very good thank you to you all. Interesting. I don't know what's your take on that.
Yeah, I mean, it was such an insightful subject, and I want to thank the panel. You were amazing. Your insights, your knowledge, this is the magic. When you have such an experienced and knowledgeable panel, it really makes such a difference. And I think this has helped, and I agree with Rob, it's really helped to demystify the intrigue surrounding fintech. There's been so many misrepresentations, I think, about it. And for those of us now watching and listening, and I think the audience on Facebook as well, you've demystified it. There's this perception that it's also like get rich quick, but you've spoken about working hard. Do not despise the day of small beginnings, I like to say, and taking it progressively as we go. So well done, wonderful topic, great insightful panel, and thank you for the wonderful audience that gave us such great questions. Congratulations to the winners. You deserved it, and all the questions were amazing. Thank you to my wonderful co-host. Lee, it was fun doing this with you, and I really enjoyed myself, but I really learned a lot. So thank you so very much.
Thank you very much. I also appreciate our panelists who took our time to come and honor our invitations. Thank you very much, Rob McNeely, Thank you very much, Dr. Babatunde Obrima. Thank you very much, Shedrack Ubanya. We are so grateful that you honored and helped us to enlighten our people. That's very, very interesting, and we really appreciate it. And also to Ayanda, it's been a very wonderful one sharing the stage with you. It's been a very insightful one and very interesting one. I really enjoyed it. So I don't know if the winners, congratulations to the winners. If you are not able to forward your details, maybe the admin could drop an email where you'll be able to forward your details to claim your prizes. It's been a very wonderful one. So it's been interesting, our first edition for the convergence of blockchain and fintech. So these great sectors coming together. It's been amazing. Well, and it's brought to you by AFRICUNIA and also in collaboration with Coin News Extra. So it's very, very, it has been a wonderful time. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Ayanda.
Yes, just to remind everyone, please follow us and connect with us on social media. If you do have questions for the members of our panel, I'm sure you can connect with them directly on LinkedIn, and speak to them directly and ask your questions. They'll be more than happy to help you, especially if you're really interested in going in this direction. And until next time, I say very good evening to all of you. Have a wonderful weekend, and we look forward to seeing you again. Thank you, AFRICUNIA TV. Thank you, Coin News Extra.
As interesting, the next edition will be coming up last week of next month. So interesting, we'll be releasing details about that. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. See you then. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.